Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Josh Schimmels, publisher and CEO of the Los Angeles Business Journal. It's my pleasure to host TechTalk. It's our continued roundtable series on technology issues impacting business. Well, it's no secret that we all rely very heavily on technology, both in our professional and our personal lives, perhaps too much. The importance of protecting our data, our information, all of our communications has never been more important, and it's also never been as challenging with new threats that appear to be popping up what seems to feel like every day. I first held this roundtable a few years ago. It was actually in the Phoenix market, and when I got to the end of our discussion, I asked one of our panelists to share their best piece of advice that they had for every attendee that was there. And he said, every time I have an important conversation, whether it's at my home with my wife or with important clients in the office, I put my phone in the microwave. Someone is always listening. And of course, I initially laughed, as did the entire audience. He didn't respond with a laugh. He just stared. And we realized he was serious. And while this may be obviously one end of the extremes, it was an interesting statement to hear from someone who is a cybersecurity professor at a major university. I'm not necessarily expecting any of today's panelists to suggest putting your phones in the microwave. You may hear that, but we're going to hear from our experts as they discuss how to protect your businesses, computer systems, the networks, the data from theft or damage. We're going to talk about advances and options in today's environment and the future of artificial intelligence, how LA is meeting the demand for AI workforce. I want to thank all of those who submitted questions during the registration process because it really helped us to shape today's conversation. I want to mention also during the discussion, we're going to be conducting live audience poll questions. So when you see them pop up on your screen, we encourage and welcome you to answer, share your response and your experiences with us, and then we'll then publish these results online next week. Before we get going, I want to thank our sponsors for all of their expertise, their input, and support of the program, as well as their general support of what I'm going to call our community of business technology. So many thanks to Miller Kaplan, Reese Security, and USC Viterbi School of Engineering. Thank you all so much for being a part of this. We've got 3 great panelists. We have a lot of topics to cover, so we're going to hop right into it. I have the pleasure of moderating our discussion today, so let me introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Yolanda Gill, Principal Scientist at the USC Information Sciences Institute and Director of New Initiatives in AI and Data Science, USC Viterbi School of Engineering. Kimberly Pease, Director of Information Security Management Services at Miller Kaplan. And Jean Yu, CEO of Resecurity, Inc. I want to thank all of you for being here. Let's get the conversation started. So I want to kick things off with a question that is directed to the entire group, and I'm asking each of you to respond. We've seen a lot of companies adopt some type of variation of what we're going to, we've termed work from home environment. As a cyber professional, how nervous does that make you from both a business and a liability standpoint? And then why? Jean, let's start off with you. What are your thoughts? Jean, I think you're still on mute.
Well, sorry. I think from a business perspective, there has been, historically, there's always been a problem with patching and hardening. And of course, the technical debt from all the digital transformation. Now we're getting the result of those activities where we couldn't do because of time, resource, and money. And now those focuses and attention should, go back into it. As a business, I'm not too worried about it, to be honest with you, because there are technologies and instrumentation in place to do things right. It just needs time and effort. I think liability perspective, obviously you're not in a working environment, you're at home. So there is, that side of things, but the reality is what I'm more concerned about is the liability of having your information not in a secure location like your office space versus being a public domain like your home. I mean, obviously there's a lot to be said about that, including, what happens, how does a law take effect or liability when you have, like, let's say, injury? So very big and open-ended, I think, topic in general.
Yeah, I think those are all excellent points. Kimberly, what would you say, what makes you nervous, and are you nervous from a business and a liability standpoint?
So first of all, thanks LABJ and Josh for having us all today. Yes, I'm nervous on many levels. I think that a lot of businesses already had people that were comfortable from working from home. And so for a lot of businesses, it kind of wasn't a big deal, including our own, right? I mean, I've been working out of the office for many years. I have company owned equipment. So it was an easy transition. But when we first started in the beginning of 2020 in the first and second quarter, I actually reached out to a lot of colleagues and clients, and a lot of them were struggling. The IT folks did as best as they could to scramble to get equipment and to get things configured and rolled out and deployed. But mistakes were inevitably made just because of the stress of the situation. And then I talked to people who had never worked from home. And so they were using their own equipment, doing the best they can, but it wasn't configured. And to Jean's point, it certainly wasn't patched and managed in the way that we cybersecurity subject matter experts want it to be. As far as the liability, I'm not the attorney, but I think that, there's so many variables when things go wrong, which Josh, you alluded to is a person working on their own personal computer systems, accessing business owned or client owned data. It certainly makes for a very complex situation, and also consequences when bad things happen.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. The panelists and I were speaking while we were in the waiting room, and I mentioned we're hosting an event in about a month that deals with the legal side of the hybrid work environment, and then, from a labor and employment standpoint. So I think that would be fascinating to cover some of these cyber issues as well. Yolanda, what about you? What are your thoughts? You're still on mute, Yolanda. There you go.
Okay, yeah. Our institute, the Information Sciences Institute at USC, we were part of the initial 3 nodes of the internet. We've been doing research in cybersecurity for decades, and still we believe that we would not be targets of cyber attacks. We would be fine. And I can tell you that I have lost, years of work through sites that were attacked and completely erased. And so in the last 5 years or so, we did a concerted effort to upgrade and extend our cybersecurity provisions and all the access to our systems from external sites. And I'm happy to say that, we continue to watch that, and it's been an amazing thing for our organization. So I would definitely recommend that everybody invests in that, no matter how small your organization is or how much you believe, like I did, that we would be okay. One thing that I'll mention is that working from home has a lot of challenges for everybody. So we've actually hired a consulting firm that gave us a lot of data, a lot of information about working remotely, helped us prepare for the transition to hybrid work. And it's really helping us make sure that the integrity of the organization, not just our computer systems, but the integrity of our organization is preserved. And it's a challenge, but we feel a little bit better to have that help. So I would also recommend that.
Thanks, Yolanda. So I'm going to ask you each to kind of answer the same question, but I'm going to rephrase it in a different way. Last year, we asked our panel, on a scale of 1 to 10, how uncomfortable are you with employees working from home? One being not very concerned at all, not very uncomfortable, and 10 being extremely uncomfortable. Last year, the average answer was 8.5, meaning pretty darn concerned. Here we are a year later. And so I'd like to ask you each on a scale of 1 to 10, how uncomfortable are you today with employees working from home? Kimberly, let's start with you.
50. Even though we've kind of, been in this situation as remote for the last 2 years, and we've kind of worked out the kinks, most business have, it's not so much the technology as what we call the human factor in information security. It's the cyber criminals know that people are still not having the technical controls, and more importantly, the cyber savviness of not clicking on links and vetting, taking the time and vetting and confirming requests that they've gotten from supposedly the C-suite or anybody higher on the totem pole. So the risks are still the same. The cyber criminals are still out there. They're still attacking all size businesses, and we have to continue to have this conversation with our workforce, our users, that no matter how technically savvy you are and no matter how much technology you throw at this problem, we still have to have the conversations with the users and the employees and even consumers, our family members, that the cyber criminals are out there and they're not stopping. It is a tsunami of different cyber attacks. So I'm at 50.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we've experienced the need for educating our employees and our teams on, being diligent and vetting everything that comes through that might not seem suspicious, but seems a little bit strange even. So I understand that. All right, so Kimberly has told us 50. I have a feeling that's going to slightly skew our average a little bit. Yolanda, what are you at?
I think I'm very low in the scale, actually. We have had for many years, in academia, we travel a lot, we work a lot off-site, and so we have our servers with the information, we work remotely. So we've been working remotely for many years. So the pandemic was not very different for us. What has happened is something that we haven't seen before, which are these invasions to Zoom meetings and classroom events. And so we've had to patch those up and adjust to that and set up new policies that are more restrictive than we would like in terms of audience participation and other things. And I'm sure you all have experience with that, but we've been able to resolve those. Our challenge really is any part of the business that requires collaborative brainstorming and collaborative creativity. And in research, that's the case a lot. So we've been using, various tools to brainstorm and collaborate online, and learning to use them has been quite an adventure. But that's my main concern, that we continue to be innovative and creative, even if we're not co-located physically.
Yeah, thanks for that. Gene, what are your thoughts? You got to give me a number. I'm going to make you give me a number for our average.
Yeah, I'll go for 2. And here's the reason why. It's kind of like extending your water hose from your house to your neighbor across the street. The technology in which the instrumentation that allows people to do remote work is still going through the same pipe. Now, there is the hygienic thing of people not following certain things and disconnecting, using their home computer for their kids and everything. But the reality for me is that, from my previous experience working in a company that has 100,000 people to 20,000 people to 500, including my company, even including my own company, we've always tested for resiliency and making sure that, whether you're connected to home base or remote in a satellite, that you're also able to work and continue to reduce that cyber risk. Now, I think that of course, as a company, we actually adopted 2 years prior to the pandemic, full virtual workforce for a number of reasons, because we deal with terrorists and different kinds of active criminals. And we took it upon ourselves to do that and made ourselves very resilient. The biggest impact is going to be on the SMB and mid markets, and where organization has less than 1,000 people, because I think there's a technology stack and other things, but the risk from a purely from cyber perspective, the threat actors, the adversaries, the criminals, nobody wants to go into the personal space, and that's not how they operate. And for them to attack in volume and to actually monetize that, it's very little when it comes to when you're working from home, and the ability for you to hop in from the machine that's at home all the way back to where the datas are, kind of like what Yolanda said about where her research data is, that is still in a place that is, has a faster speed, higher speed. So the ability for the adversaries to crawl into, let's say, infected machine from your home machine and then back into where all your server farm is, your cloud farm is, that level of kind of persistent access inside the network and being able to move around and pivot is just not there anymore. So that's what we're observing. So that's why for us, and as a company and as somebody who's watching all the current world events, I know there's a lot of thing about like, hey, remote workforce, virtual, yeah, do your job, right? Like patches, hardening, like hygiene stuff that you're supposed to do. But the risk to, targeting virtual workforce, not so much.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, we've got such different perspectives, which is why we host these, to provide different points of view from different areas of expertise. Yolanda, you mentioned, the invasions on Zoom meetings and in classrooms. I've not been a part of a Zoom invasion, but I know my daughters have been a part of school invasions on their, about a year ago. So that it's happening, and you're right, they're new challenges for us to solve. Kimberly and Jean, okay, this next question is for the two of you. When it comes to cybersecurity, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges that you do see for businesses as it relates specifically to protecting their data today? Kimberly, let's start with you.
So what was the last few words? I didn't catch the last few words in the sentence.
Yeah, what are the biggest challenges you see for businesses specifically relating to protecting data today?
So one of the challenges, I think, is the fact that leadership isn't focusing on cyber risk like they are financial risk or operational risk or competitive risk. I think that, I just spoke to a group of CEOs just last Tuesday, and to hear them talk about cyber, all that they talk about and spoke about and know about was IT, was the technology. To Jean's point, smaller companies, small to medium-sized businesses don't really have a full IT department, and they might just have an IT guy or an IT person. So I think one of the biggest challenges is having the C-suite understand that this isn't a technical problem. This is a risk management challenge that needs to be addressed on an executive level. The executives have to identify the tolerance that they're willing to accept as it relates to risk. And then and only then can they tell that or share that with the rest of the organization about how much risk they're willing to tolerate against the information, and communicate that to IT to put in the appropriate controls based on that risk. Yeah,
I think that's an excellent point. We're actually going to address sort of the concept of IT versus security in a little bit, because I think sometimes they're interchanged incorrectly. Jean, what would you say the biggest challenges to businesses are related to protecting data today?
Well, I'm sure Yolanda's going to love this, but it's like we have too much data. Not only that, we don't know where all the data is and who the owner is. And it's part of what we have created: digital transformation, digitization, and it's okay. Now, how we got to figure out how to harness that data. I know there's a lot of topics and marketing terms about zero trust, and what can people do is to understand where your data is. For example, whether it's social media, what you're allowing people to have access to in a workplace, and actually mostly in the business side, we're creating massive amounts of data. What we need to start looking at is, how do we compartmentalize the data? Similarly, what happened with PCI, where we had to create a separate networks where we had only the payment card information. In the same essence, we need to get back to the basics in creating block and tackle related to where the plumbing is, like your network, and then understanding where the data is, and then actually putting them in the right place, putting some controls and measures to understand where and how you're going to use those data. And of course, adding to the Kimberly's point, like, what is the risk of those data? Like, is it business impacting? Is it technology? In Yolanda's case, is it all the research, that's been done? And what is the cost of those data? Well, I don't want to say cost, because then we get into the whole, mathematical formula of risk assessment. But the reality is data is money. For the bad guys, the criminals, where the troves of data you have is where the money, how we're going to exfiltrate that data and then, bribe your, ransom you or whatever you're going to do. But really get back to the fundamentals of have an inventory of where your data is, and then figure out what you're going to do with that data. What are the controls you're going to have in place? How do you put, fence around it? How do you put encryption around it? But the most important thing is to start inventorying the data. And especially with the cloud, we created a multiplier where now we're transferring data from A to B. And then, of course, you got your supply chain where you're creating, additional sets of data that's constantly being created.
No, Josh, I want to tag, if I can, on Jean's comment. One thing that we rarely hear, especially C-levels or executives, talk about is data retention, right? Get rid of the data if you no longer need it. One of our clients, the CEO said, well, how many credit cards do we take in a month? And it was pretty inconsequential to him. So he said, just get rid of all the credit cards. We're not going to take credit cards again. So it's reducing the footprint and the data itself. Where can we get rid of data in addition to categorizing it and identifying who the owners is? Get rid of it if we no longer need it.
Kimberly, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was just in a meeting yesterday with our team leaders, having a meeting about this exact subject, about data retention. Why are we keeping so much? How much do we actually need? Let's go through it and be a little bit more intentional about what we're keeping and why, and then how we're storing it. Jean, I want to go back to you because you mentioned the word, bribes and ransomware. So let's stay on that for a moment, because we do hear a lot about ransomware incidents, Colonial Pipeline. We know extortion of large organizations, sometimes in the tens of millions of dollars from a demand standpoint. What are the current dynamics in that space? Why and how is this continuing to happen?
Well, why is because there's money to be made from the bad guys. I mean, it's any other criminal behavior, whether you're home thief or you're a bank robber or whatever criminal activity you do, it's creating a place where you can make money. Now, why do these people do it? I could give you hundreds of different reasons, but it's kind of like business. There is criminal empires where people are making money, and we're allowing that to happen. How is very simple. There's not these are not the events that are happening is not a product or a solution. It is a kind of a individual contribution problem. As an organization, like, we don't do a good job of patching. We don't do a good job of hardening our systems. The hygiene and the technical debt that we have incurred as a business is allowing this to happen. I'll give you a perfect example. A typical ransomware group, typical, they have an average budget of about $50,000 to $70,000. And what do they do with it? It's like project management 101. They get project managers, they get developers, they get engineers, and then they figure out a plan to do this campaign or this project. And whether their success rate is 1%, but it never goes over 10%, or 4%, they will be successful. Why? Because there's not a single system in the world that is 100% patched. And of course, there's a human factor. And it's kind of like, when you worry about your home, right? You worry about whether or not somebody's going to break in, you put your Ring alarm, you put your ADT security systems. If people want to get into your house, they're going to get into your house, regardless of the security controls. And that's the reality. Criminals don't care. And where there's money to be made, they're going to go after it.
I think that's a great analogy for us all to think about, the home analogy. If there's a way to get in, they'll find a way. And that happens in the cyber world also.
Right.
And, I think intuitively, a lot of us, including myself, we don't hear, we hear it on the news every once in a while, big ransomware, but it's gotten quieter. I think it's almost gotten more accepted. It's almost, in some ways like the cost of doing business. And I believe that's a problem in itself. But a topic for another day. We're gonna shift a little bit here and start talking about artificial intelligence, because it's quickly become a part of industry, a part of businesses, a part of applications in nearly every sector of our economy. Companies have research labs which are powered by unprecedented data and computing, which have led to major AI advances. So, Yolanda, given all this information and how many AI advances are resulting from industry research, how are the universities contributing to the future of AI? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you excited about? Yolanda is still on mute.
Thank you. I love this question. I read so much in the news about AI and innovation that comes from companies, and a lot of it is very exciting. So things that big tech is doing with AI, with all the computing resources that they have, the unique data that they have, it's really amazing. But I want to reflect a little bit on this and see that from the point of view of the innovations, a lot of the AI innovations that you see started in academia and started much further back than you may realize. So for example, about a year ago, I read a piece of news that the first car powered by a neural network drove across the country autonomously, right? I don't know if you know this, but the first car that drove itself autonomously across the country with a neural network was not last year, was not 2021 or 2015 or even 2010, not even the year 2000. It was the year 1997. 1997, we had a neural network drive a car across the country autonomously from Pittsburgh to San Diego. And they tried to get in the Tonight Show to talk to the public about this event. And the producers told them this was not interesting to anybody, right? So for many years, we've been doing incredible innovations in academia. This was done by researchers at Carnegie Mellon. It was the PhD thesis of one of my colleagues. And there's been so many innovations in AI. So now I think industry is picking up and it's embracing this. And I think I want to put a plea to anyone out there in industry to really treasure this engine of innovation that we have in universities in the US, and to think about how to partner with us to do the next wave of innovation and AI research. We have this unique ability in academia of involving scholars and experts in any area that may be relevant to a problem. So for example, in cybersecurity, we don't just have cybersecurity experts that have years or decades of expertise in this. We bring in social scientists, psychologists, people that do communications, that know how to pass on the message to the larger public. We have experts in AI and machine learning. So we just bring in all this expertise to tackle the problems. So, so universities do have a lot to contribute to AI and to the future of AI. And perhaps our biggest treasure are the students. The students come in with incredible passion, incredible talent. They are super creative. I feel I'll never get old because they really keep us on our toes, and we can always see how things change every year when we get new students in. So, so the future of AI is very much depending on keeping our universities alive and active in AI.
Yolanda, quick question, unscripted here. As you're talking, I'm curious, if I'm an incoming student and I want to go into the field of AI, where am I going? Is it engineering? Is it computer systems? Is it technology? Or is it all the above?
You would always go to computer science. Sometimes the Department of Computer Science is part of engineering, as is the case in USC. In other cases, the Department of Computer Science is separate from engineering. For us, and particularly if we're talking about cybersecurity and assurance, imagine the cybersecurity and assurance challenges of AI systems, right? That converse, that are learning from the data that you give them, that are very susceptible to attacks from different kinds of data or perceptions of the world. And so we have a lot of tradition in engineering on systems assurance and developing safety for aviation, for example. We have colleagues in aerospace engineering that teach us a lot about autonomous systems and self-sustaining AI systems. So we think that being in engineering makes AI a lot richer. We do a lot of work on AI for engineering also, you know, physics-based machine learning that is transforming engineering. So you can learn about AI in many places, but to get a degree in AI, you would come to computer science.
I appreciate that. I think all of us are curious about it. All right, Kimberly, so I'm going to put you on the spot. I mentioned earlier, IT, information security, many managers and a lot of us non-techie CEOs, you know, want to know what the difference is. You know, a lot of us think it's IT's job to protect information. Is this way of thinking flawed? And if so, why?
So unfortunately it is. And the challenge that we have in information security is most of us started in technology and then evolved into information security. But the main difference is IT, which is information technology. Their role and their goal is to keep systems up and running, to keep the technology, to Jean's point, patched and updated, to, you know, make sure that the data is there and it's backed up. Information security is the focus is on the information itself. What type of information are we housing or storing or transmitting or managing? What laws and regulations do businesses have to comply based on what type of information they have access to or managing? What contractual requirements is the business under that their clients have mandated that the businesses comply with? So yes, that we need the technical folks. They are part of the solution. But information security is a different discipline. And IT folks typically, historically, don't have to comply with guidance and guidelines and frameworks. Whereas information security folks, that's part of that training. That's part of that background, is to comply with with formal frameworks and policies and standards and IT security standards. So that's kind of the main difference is the focus itself, the goals, and also the disciplines in protecting information.
Thanks for helping break that down, Kimberly. I think that was helpful. All right, we're going to go dark here for a moment, and by that I mean dark web. Gene, I'm going to ask you a question. You sort of responded a little bit to this already, but there are a couple differences in the question now. Where would you say that the dark web ecosystem is moving today? Did COVID have an impact on threat factors? Did the system become more aggressive, more financially motivated? You talked about anytime there's money to be made, there's data to steal, it's going to happen. Do you have additional thoughts on this? Where it's going?
Well, I think so. Just to make it simple, dark web is basically a marketplace. There's actually good and bad things happen in the marketplace. It was originally developed as a research link, so it's not. I don't want people to think dark web is a bad thing, but what we hear in the market, dark web is a marketplace where the criminals hang out and conduct business. As a market, it hasn't really changed significantly. I think people are becoming more aware, but real criminals don't talk in dark web. Terrorists do not talk in dark web. That's not how it works. So what you hear in the media and everything else is one thing, but the reality is that dark web is just a marketplace, and it's there, and that's where good and bad happens. COVID, all these world events, is it anything making a difference or change? Not really. Again, that's not real professional criminals or real cyber terrorists or adversaries actually congregate. It's a more lower level. I would pay attention to making sure as a large organization, you are monitoring and seeing what information is there, but to always know what's in the dark web is secondary market, not a primary market. So I call it the Walmart. It's not a Whole Foods. Best way Californians understand it.
I appreciate that. No, that's helpful. Thanks for breaking that down. All right, I want to go back to AI. There have been several bills in Congress that have been designed to create, 10, 15, even 20 regional technology hubs in the nation, which would then aim to foster innovation, economic growth. I think we'd all agree that Los Angeles is already one of these hubs. Yolanda, what's the current landscape of AI innovation in Southern California, and what can the region do to better position itself as a national leader in tech innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you are right. When I see studies about regional capability in terms of technology, we are very excited at USC that Los Angeles is always a very vibrant innovation ecosystem. So that's very exciting. And I think we can become one of these regional technology hubs that Congress intends to fund. However, I see that our students don't remain in the region. They mostly go elsewhere. They go to other areas to strengthen the innovation ecosystem in those areas. So for example, our computer science and computing graduates are the 5th largest in terms of hires by big tech. And so you can imagine that most of our students go to other regions. So we want to keep them here. There's so much innovation in Southern California and in the LA region. Just from USC, there's a lot of startups and successful companies. We had Second Spectrum that focuses on sports data science, sell for $200 million just last year. We had our Moxie social assisted robot be ranked in the best inventions of 2020 by Time Magazine in the cover. I was in the cover. There's so many entrepreneurs and business startups in the region, but we have to keep our students here. We have to keep our graduates here, and at the same time, keep industry engaged with the innovation that comes from universities. I know innovation comes from different sources, but universities are a big source of innovation. So we offer many courses on new and advanced topics. We have a lot of distance education programs. Actually, our computer science distance education program is ranked #1 in the nation. And we have to establish partnerships between academia and industry that will help us solve challenging problems and do interesting work. And they'll help provide unique opportunities to train our students. So we have to find better ways to do partnerships between university and academia. And I think that's what Congress intends. And we live in a great place to start to do that. And I think USC is doing a lot to do innovation.
All right, so I want to, before we go back to some of our planned questions, I want to take just a few minutes to address some questions that have come in from our audience. One that I thought was particularly interesting that was just handed to me was about negotiating cyber risks and contracts with vendors. Okay, in other words, you know, as business leaders, we negotiate all sorts of protections via indemnity agreements, limits of liability, and other performance issues into contracts on a general basis. That's something we're used to doing. What is often overlooked or even contracted out are the vendor's responsibility to the customer surrounding cyber liability. Jean, this seems like it's in your area directly, and maybe Kimberly as well. Jean, what are your thoughts on this? What should we be doing to negotiate these types of things into our vendor contracts? Do we have any? Is there anywhere to go with this? Do we have you know, any background?
No, I think I'll put it very simply. We have to not think of the cyber insurance as anything other than how you're getting insurance for your car. You need to pay attention to what are those things are. I know we put another icing on the cake and call it cyber insurance and liability, cyber attacks, nation state. All this verbiage doesn't really mean much at the end of the day when you're actually going to a court or when you're trying to get an underwriter write your insurance. What people should do is just pay attention to what you're doing, what is it that you're signing up for, and making sure you have the mechanism to, you know, file a warranty claim or file a claim, because that's what it really comes down to. And I don't want people to feel like this is a huge another burden of things. It's insurance. It's like your car insurance or home insurance or your flood insurance, earthquake insurance. Don't complicate things than what it is. We in the market have put too much marketing jargons into too many things. And I think it's people to just look at it just for what it is in a simple English to see that this is another insurance.
So
Can I jump in here, Josh?
Yes, please.
You mentioned, here's what we're seeing it touches on insurance, but it's also expanded, kind of far-reaching, is this third-party risk management. What we're seeing is a lot of clients are now sending out what's referred to as a vendor questionnaire. And the questionnaire is asking vendors who have either access to information of their clients or who share information with their clients, or they're not clients, they're just a third party that shares information. And so these questionnaires are surfacing a lot of insecurities, not only in technology, but processes. It's surfacing a lot of conversations between these entities that on one hand, it's really good because we got to talk about it. We got to talk about, again, the type of information that's being shared and who owns it and who's responsible for it. And it's not a simple it's not a simple subject. It's really understanding what third parties, clients, vendors, what they're doing with the information, where they're storing it, who has access to it, and what we touched on earlier, how long are you going to keep around this data? So it's really, it's a insurance policy, and it's also a relationship between all these third parties, the topic being information security.
I appreciate you both chiming in there. I've got another question here that I'm going to direct toward Yolanda. It's about AI, and it comes in from our audience as well. The question is, how is AI being used to protect businesses from cyber attacks, both internally and externally? I guess I would rephrase that. What is USC seeing in the area of technologies that are more preventative in nature, helping businesses from cyber attacks? What are your thoughts?
So we have a very strong group of faculty working on cybersecurity, but also on trustworthy computing. Trustworthy computing means that you design all your hardware and software stack with security and assurance in mind. And so I can mention, for example, that we have a nationwide range for experiments in cybersecurity, and that serves hundreds of institutions and thousands of students learning about cybersecurity and doing research in this area. So we've run this range for over 10 years. It's called Deter. We also do a lot of work with AI for cybersecurity. So for example, using machine learning to detect unusual patterns and sophisticated techniques to notice irregularities and detect attacks. There's also a lot of work on improving people's behavior. So what makes someone who's been trained to be safe and to do things in a certain way and to follow certain processes, what makes that individual deviate from what they've learned to do? We also have a lot of work on analyzing software, looking for patterns that may point to vulnerabilities in the software. So very recently, this group actually found a vulnerability in a software used by millions, and it's an open source software, and the vulnerability was fixed within hours, and a new version was released. We also do a lot of work on inventorying resources for cybersecurity research to facilitate everybody's work in this area. So many different aspects of research. And I think businesses benefit because directly we contribute to improvements in open source packages, or we're developing the technologies of tomorrow.
Thanks a lot. I want to take there's another question that came in, and it's important, so I'm going to ask the group, and it also happened to come up when the four of us were chatting sort of behind the scenes, waiting to come into this panel. So the question was about workforce diversity, and this resonates with the Business Journal. We just held our annual Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Awards last month. I'd like to get the panel's thoughts on where they believe we are with DE&I, specifically in the cyber workforce. Where are we today? And if we don't like where we are, how do we get to where we want to be? Jean, I'm going to put this one to you first. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, and I'm going to ask the other two panelists to start thinking about their responses as well. Jean, you're up first. Workforce diversity in the cyber world. What does it look like?
Well, it's terrible because we have pointed hair bosses that hire people for the wrong reason. We don't have a cyber workforce problem. We have a management problem that wants to look at shiny objects, not look at the person for it, what they actually bring to the table. It's a perfect example is, Henry Schimber, who used to be CEO of Coca-Cola. He started as a truck driver. We all started at the bottom, yet we look at everybody as a certificate or what products they know how to do instead of the actual human skills that makes where some of the top tier cyber people are. And it's terrible, whether it's diversity or inclusion. The reality is that unless we start, removing our management and then hiring the right people to lead a team, we're going to have this continuous problem.
I think I wrote down what you just said. We're looking too much at certificates and we're not looking enough at people. I think that's a really interesting statement. Kimberly, you're up next. What are your thoughts?
So it's so ironic because I was just talking with a business leader just yesterday. And those CEOs that I presented to last week for 4 hours, everybody, the number one topic is lack of staff, lack of people. And the CEO, the owner that I talked to yesterday said, I almost don't care what they have for training. I need them to fit into this culture. I need to, incorporate diversity. I need to incorporate different ways of thinking. And, to Yolanda's point, the creating the space for people to think outside their own boxes, so to speak. I do think, though, I'm seeing a lot of our clients and colleagues really incorporating, including Miller Kaplan, we're really incorporating diversity, the DEI model, and there's a lot of momentum right now, I think, with that, and incorporating it into our normal standard everyday meetings, right? Just like we suggest incorporating information security or cybersecurity topics. You don't have to spend a long time on it, just a tip of the day or a news article that you can, reference. Just keeping this conversation going, I think, is going to take us a long way.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we emphasize on a regular basis as we talk about our own DEI initiatives and taking them out to the business community, is keeping the conversation going. Yolanda, what are your thoughts on this?
I think, USC, I'm very proud to say that we give the diversity and equity aspects of training students a very high priority. So I don't know if you know this, but USC has the most community college transfers of any private school in the country. So we're very proud of that. In engineering, very unusual, but for 3 years in a row, our entering class is 50% female, 50% female for engineering. We have 25% of our new students in engineering are Latinx. 30% are first generation. I mean, I get shivers just thinking about all the effort. We have an entire department that does a tremendous amount of outreach, a tremendous amount of fundraising and fellowships. We partner with HBCUs and other minority serving institutions. We partner with community colleges. It's really exciting. We're also partnering with the military and DoD to serve veterans. We have the #1 distance learning program for computer science for veterans. And we are doing strategic partnerships with the Space Force, for example. We're the only university in the western side of the US that is partnering with the Space Force, and Space Force. And we're doing new innovative programs with the Army in AI in particular for training our military. So a lot to do, but we're working very, very hard to broaden the participation in computing and in engineering. And we're really looking forward to working more with other institutions to grow this pipeline.
Yolanda, I wrote 3 things down out of what you just said. 50% female, 30% first generation, 25% Latinx. Congratulations. That's showing that, at least in some areas, we're trending in the right direction. Jean points out that we still have more work to do. So
we're not near where we want to be, but
well.
We're moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you to the audience, for those of you submitted. I think those were all fantastic questions. There's more we didn't get to, but I think it's a helpful conversation starter. So as we wrap up, I'm going to ask for parting thoughts from the panel in the form of actionable takeaways for our audience today. We've heard a lot of information. It's hard to know where to start, where to go. What are 3 things that businesses can do to get started today? Yolanda, let's start with you.
Yeah, so one is to really explore partnerships with academia. We have USC has a National Science Foundation Award, which is called I-Corps. We are a hub for the Western United States for promoting innovation and partnerships with industry. So we'll be receiving you with open arms if you have ideas or areas where you want to challenge. And partnerships between academia and industry are really crucial to solve challenging problems in AI and engineering, but also to provide unique education opportunities for our students. In universities, we have this unique ability to easily involve experts in almost any discipline, and companies have incredible engineering teams that work routinely with real problems, so very exciting partnerships. Second, consider taking our advanced courses in data science, AI, engineering. Train your best people in advanced technologies to move your company forward. And third, hire our students. They are the best. Don't let them go elsewhere.
Wonderful. Kimberly, 3 pieces of advice, actionable takeaways.
So I think for those executive leaders on the line, senior managers, put information security in your top 5 risk bucket that you manage. Don't assume that your IT folks have it taken care of. Understand that you don't know what you don't know until you conduct an assessment. To the IT folks, they're collaborate, reach out to cybersecurity, information security experts, because we're seeing that this relationship between IT and information security can be really, really collaborative. One of our clients says that her IT department is now kind of thinking as thought leaders to be able to talk about risk and kind of broadening their mind. And I think to all the users and the consumers and the employees on the line, we've got to get trained. We've got to be open. We've got to understand that our information and our business information is out there. So be on your guard, be good cyber guardians, and understand that every single one of us, whether we're consumers or employees, are under attack.
Outstanding. Thank you, Kimberly. Gene.
Okay, so one, keep it simple, whether it's tech or business people. Speak plain English. We don't need to use jargons. It complicates things even more. 2, don't believe all the media stuff. Criminals don't have a plan or all these TTPs or these things. Criminals are criminals. Just like they rob your house, they rob your car. Criminals don't have a model. It's just, that's how they are. And I think the third thing is keep everything to basics. Don't overcomplicate the technology problem into business. I think we spend too much time trying to use technology to fix a business problem when we need to hear more about what the business problems are and then translate that in and provide a solution. And that's it.
All right, so I wrote down some takeaways here to try to sum it up as we wrap things up. Explore partnerships, education in technology, hire the best, prioritize IT as a risk, reach out to IT and IS experts, be a good guardian, keep it simple and basic. I'm going to say it because it was said, don't necessarily agree with this one. He said, don't believe the media. Maybe don't believe all media.
All media.
All media. I'm kidding. I want to thank all of you. This has been a great hour, outstanding information, actionable takeaways, a lot of areas to think about. I want to encourage our audience to connect with our experts, find them on LinkedIn, reach out to them, give them a call. They're here today because they can help your business. They can help your tech strategies. They can help with everything they just discussed. And so please join me in thanking our panelists, Yolanda, Kimberly, and Gene. It's been a really interesting hour. Appreciate all of your input and your guidance. I'm going to remind all of you that Mondays, both print and digital versions of the Business Journal are going to highlight this event. Additionally, if there's other people that weren't able to join us today and you think they would benefit from this, You can get a recorded version of this entire program on our website, probably beginning tomorrow or Friday, labusinessjournal.com. We look forward to hosting you again on this topic soon. In the meantime, don't put your phones in the microwave, but stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you all so much.